The wind howled outside like some banshee Halloween bash, shaking the panes of every window in the time-worn small-town store. When Brendan had first seen the sign outside that said Old Things and New Adventures, he had almost laughed at the idea. This tiny town had all the adventure of watching a cornstalk twist in the wind like a tangled-up puppet or mangled marionette. The strange, rusty door chime had greeted him upon entering the store, and the cashier's desk seemed a half-mile away from where he stood at the entrance. No one stood behind the desk, but the little saloon doors behind it swayed ever so slightly. The laugh track of an old black-and-white holiday special was playing somewhere on an unseen television, and it paired with the whirring of a small space heater as the only noises that greeted Brendan's ears. Unlike the humor that he felt at the word adventure on the sign outside, a new emotion sprang up inside, and he couldn't help himself as he began walking deeper into the store. A strange curiosity had come over him. Aisle after aisle he had browsed and peered, the dim lights overhead making him see things that weren't there out of the corner of his eyes. The laughter on the television echoed farther away now as the gray and black checkered tiles on the floor seemed to be calling him to keep stepping further and farther inward towards the mysterious end goal. He saw toys and trinkets, along with baubles, bassinets, and broken things, baby carriages and bronzed baby boots, bold colored paintings, old wood-carved artwork, and cautionary literature from the 1940s and 50s. The paper of these pamphlets had at some stage been soaked through, yet as it had immediately been dried again, carefully and with a fervor. Those pamphlets and magazines meant a lot to someone, it seemed, at some point in the distant past. But now this old store in this tiny little township was more than likely their final resting place. His worn, rain-soaked sneakers made a telltale squeak with every cautious step he took. He hoped that no one would stop him on his quest, and yet he hoped that someone was nearby. He hoped beyond hope that this new feeling, this strange emotion, was pulling him to something valuable or important to him. Maybe his father. The chime rang again, yet this time it seemed far off and in distance, signifying how deep Brendan had traversed into the store. It hadn't seemed this big from the outside, but aisle after aisle of forgotten treasures and past possessions kept pulling him in, encouraging him onward. This odd quest. He wondered if his dad had entered the store, finally noticing him missing. He wondered what his excuse would be for wandering off this time. Though he couldn't put a finger on it, he knew he had a reason, just not one likely any normal adult would ever understand. It was simple enough to Brendan as he felt the feeling that he felt deeply and darkly in his feelers. It was as if something was pulling him inwards, aisle by aisle. It was something critical to his future existence, calling him away from the entrance and ever deeper into the maze of the aisleways and ancient ironwork art. Item after item became more odd and strange the further he walked, yet his squeaking sneakers dared not stop in the aisle where he stepped. Always a few steps further did he dare himself to go. He felt the bubbling pride of the carvers and artists as he slid his fingers along the dusty edges of their once-loved masterworks. He could sense the arrogance of the sculptors and scribes who made these items with labor and lament in order to outlast their own physical and failing bodies. These works of art had indeed outlasted their makers, and likely for a long time too, but they did not rest in a much-lauded museum, Brendan mused. At least he thought, not in the kind of museum that the artists had likely dreamed of. This was indeed a museum of sorts, but where you could take an entire exhibit home with you for a cool $20. This was more like a mausoleum than a museum. Brendan felt more like a cold hall of dead memories than a hall of wisdom that called people to remember the past. Brendan had always felt an odd sense of deja vu when he walked amongst items of forgotten pasts, and this was no exception. His mind imagined strange, bright, even vivid flashes of the prior owners or creators at prime moments for remembering. Sometimes the flashes were stronger, sometimes less so, but he believed that he really felt the feelings of those who came so long before him, and it was almost as if he was haunted by them. To escape the imaginary flashes of the ghosts of the former owners, buried so far in the past, Brendan marched onward into the maze. Deeper and deeper, Brendan chose to explore, going further into the old store than even seemed logically possible. Items from past decades, some caked in years of neglect and ever-thickening dust, beckoned for his touch. But Brennan had felt enough of the odd sensations as it was. Every slow, careful step he took brought him closer to the thing he felt calling to him, and he aimed to find it, and then to find the exit. He relished this moment, this chase into the unknown, though his pulse now raced forehead dripped with sweat. He slipped his hand into the slightly stretched neck hole of his gray and red t-shirt as he stepped ever forward and found a silver locket that held a picture of his mother. As he felt the mysterious call grow stronger, he recalled her words of weird wisdom before she had passed away in the summer of the year previous. She had told him with utter certainty to listen to his inner voice, or as some might call it, his gut instinct. His dad had never fully understood any of the final lessons she gave, as Brendan's dad relied much more on logic and ethics. But when Delilah Bradrick Bad had passed on, neither of the Batmen were much for logical feelings or any feelings, logical or otherwise. Ethics, too, took a seat in the back row and fell silent for a time. Brendan and his dad had enough deep water to wade through internally and dared not listen to the you should or you could have voices that some choose to heed in times of great pain or peril. They simply devoted themselves to their current course, neither altering path nor the aim of their journey. It had happened, it was not denied, but they had yet to allow it to change them. Some might say that such avoidance of the obvious would damage the Batmen further in the seasons to come, but Brendan needed such logical warnings. He heeded them with numb and dumbfounded apathy. Even if those that spoke thus were indeed correct, what good would it do them? Nothing, it seemed to Brendan. Whether those emotional gurus were right or not, Brendan and his dad would have to carry the burden alone, either way. No, Brendan confirmed to himself, logic and ethics were not welcome here at this stage and place, nor on this page of his life story. He was trusting his inner voice, and it was leading him towards the darkest patch in the entire vast store space. The lights overhead seemed truly haunted, flickering and flashing like they could short-circuit at any moment. And though it set Brendan's nerves on edge, he knew it to be where he must go all the more. No danger, no reward, he whispered to himself, clutching his mother's locket tight. The damaged and flickering lights above gave their light brightly and suddenly. It felt like a pleasant sign that he was past the hardship of his chosen path. His nerves, if only for a brief moment, calmed. A gust of cold air suddenly erupted on the back of his neck, nearly sending his sports cap tumbling from its place, and even his inner voice fell suddenly silent as he spun to face his aerial aggressor. Yet high above him, set between the rows of faulty, flickering, luminescent bulbs, rested a massive ventilation grate that allowed in Arctic air gusts, seemingly in random, short bursts. This grate also seemed to be ancient and faulty like the lights, and Brendan felt suddenly silly for being so easily startled. A warm, embarrassed blush rested on his young cheeks, yet like all growing children, his grasp on the possibility of the fantastic still clung to some parts of him inside. Instead of a gusting air conditioner unit that had aimlessly misfired, to Brendan, it very well could have been the icy breath of an invisibility-cloaked undead warrior stalking its prey, or a weaponized wind gust from an abominable snow beast clamoring for its next meal. Fantasy called out to Brendan in this challenging time, and Brendan allowed it to tickle his childish imagination. Brendan's dad wanted him to abandon all fanciful things so very strongly that it almost pushed Brendan in the opposing direction, and his mother's memory dripped more and more with colorful hue by the day. She had been a being of emotion and imagination, and his dad was such an opposite spirit, all logic and labor inside. His mother, in a small and quiet way, was telling him to keep marching forward into the mysterious calling. The store seemed steeped in magic of some kind, and Brendan longed to know what lay at the center of this odd labyrinth. The aisle he had walked thus far was abruptly coming to an end just ahead. His brave march halted. Something caught his ear, something familiar, and he tried his best to listen. He could almost hear a voice, perhaps even his father's voice, calling his name in the distance. It called in a tone neither totally angry nor only curious, but concerned at the very core. Whether it was Brendan's confused imagination or a true reality, Brendan was at this moment unsure. The only surety Brendan knew now lay ahead. His goal was growing closer with every step. This reading was brought to you by Stephen from CallionMustFall.com. This is my book, Brendan Bat's Bold Ballad, Beneath the Harvest Moon. I hope to bring more to you soon. That was chapter 1. What did you think? Please let me know in the comments. I think it's a bit wordy and kind of kooky, but there's a story there. I think it's just kind of covered up in extra words. I care about you.